So if you guys have been following the channel, we've actually been working on my S13 behind me. And that's been the main focus, to try to get this car done as soon as possible. But unfortunately, there's a couple things that popped up. Number one, I'm still waiting for a couple parts, but that's just a matter of time. Number two is, well, cars have gotten really expensive. And buying parts for this thing has gotten really hard. And while having all the other projects I have, I decided to kind of just take a different approach on everything. So if you've been into the car thing for a while, then you know they've never been cheap to build. But as of lately, over the past couple of years, things have gone astronomically crazy. And it's almost impossible to be able to build multiple chassis and enjoy your cars to the fullest. So that being said, I decided to take a different approach. And that's actually going to be, well, let's finish up some cars that we plan on selling to free up some funds so we can get cars like this one behind me looking just that much better and with just that much more quality parts. So then with that being said, I'm going to introduce you guys a car I've had for a very long time with a very long story behind it. So I present to you guys my 1993 Toyota Mr2. And this was actually my first car, and I got this car back in high school. And this car was my first everything, pretty much. My first time painting, my first time rebuilding the engine, my first time working on a car. And, well, I had a lot of issues with that, as, again, it was my first time. Now, I bought this car when I was 15, and I've had it ever since. And, well, although all good things must come to an end, this is going to be one of those just moments that it's about time the story ends. Now, this car actually has a crazy story behind it, but it's very long. So to give you guys a quick rundown, I had blown the motor in this car 4 times. And, well, making $8 an hour, it was very hard to continuously afford these OEM Toyota rebuild kits that were right around $3,000 every single time you blew up the engine. So eventually I got to the point that I couldn't afford to drive the car anymore, and I left it exactly how it was blown. Now, this comes to the whole non-experience thing. I ended up finding out much later that the issue was pretty simple. The injector on cylinder number 3 wasn't firing correctly. So with that being said, it was creating lean conditions, and it got hot, and it would continuously melt pistons. Eventually, it got to the point it started Frankensteining the motor back together. I would take pistons that weren't bad and start throwing them back in, and it just constantly had a lot of issues, and I ended up just getting really tired and frustrated with it, as this is not an easy car to work on at all, much less being your first car. Years later, ended up selling the car, and, well, the car basically traveled from South Florida to about 2 hours north to Central Florida to Idaho, to Utah, then ended up in Idaho. From there, I purchased the car back 3 years ago, and it's been pretty much in the state it currently is right now. And if you don't know much about MR2s, I don't blame you. These are cars that really went under the radars, and over the years, they're still kind of under the radar. This is actually essentially a poor man's Ferrari. And unlike a Supra that's gone up in value 10 times its original price, this car has gone up quite a bit, but it's nowhere near some of the other Toyota prices. Now, these cars came with 2 engines. They came NA and they came turbo. The NA came with a 5S FE, which is a Camry motor. It's a 2.2 liter iron block, really slow, and made probably about 140 horsepower. And that's going to be the NA variants of these cars. Now, turbo variants came with 3S GTEs. Now, a 3S GTE is actually a Toyota, which is actually a 2J blueprint engine. And essentially, it's a 2J with 2 less cylinders. It's a 2.0 iron block. The big issue with the 3S was that all the American versions came only second gens, and these had a lot of electrical issues, as it had a lot of new technology for its time. Now, the later generations, Gen 3s, 4s, 5s, came in other cars only everywhere else except America, and those were much better. But what we had here was just second gen. This car is actually an NA chassis, so it came factory with a 5S. And at some point in its life, it actually had a second gen 3S GTE swap. When I bought the car, I had a 3S swap. I ended up re-swapping the swap because it was very poorly done. It was just a total mess. It was not taken care of, and you could tell this car was just absolutely abused its entire life. Well, when I bought the car back, I decided, well, now that I actually have money to actually afford the car, I was going to build the car how I anticipated from the beginning. And it wasn't going to be a 5S, and it wasn't going to be a 3S, and it was actually going to be none of the above. And, well, as of everybody in current days, I actually went with the K-Series. Now, this here is a Frankenstein K-Series swap, which we'll explain more about later. And this was the route I always wanted to go. As you can tell, there's a bunch of space to work on in here. It's way more open, and overall, it's just significantly better than having the annoying 3S inside the car. Now, because this is my first car, I want to give this car the respect that I think it deserves. And the swap that's in it, although it's decent, it could be a lot better, and it looks very rough. It's been sitting for probably about 2 years now, and I want to just give it the treatment that I know high school Justin would have loved to have given it. So we're going to start off. This is going to be our template. We're going to completely remove everything off the car. We're going to start fresh from ground zero, and we'll work our way from there. So the first step to this entire process is, let's remove the K-Series, and let's go from there. So now next to me you can see my K-Series, and this is no stock K-Series. This is a K24 Z2 bottom end, which is essentially just one of the family car variants, and this is a K20 Z1 head, which is actually out of a Civic. This essentially is the K-Series most people want, the K2024. Now the reason for it is the 24 has obviously more displacement. It's 0.4 liters bigger, so you're gonna get more torque, and the K20 head flows a lot better than the K24 head. Now I know the common K swap is the K24A2, which is out of the TSX. Now the only issue you have with this swap is, well, depending what combinations you do, some of them actually don't mix well. You might actually have clearance issues between like the valves and the pistons. Now here we actually have a fully Frankenstein motor. We have the Z1 head, we have the cams out of a Civic, we have SuperTech dual valve springs, we have bigger valves, we have everything's been completely regasketed, CP pistons, manly rods. This is essentially, it's a fully built K-Series. It came out of a car that made 600 on low boost for break-in. The guy unfortunately was wrapped it around a tree, so now we have the motor here, and this is going to be going to our K-Series. Now from there we have a ported RBC. So on our RBC we have an 80mm K-Series throttle, K-tuned throttle body. We have 2250cc Bosch injectors, and other than that, it's pretty much just your normal go-to K-Series. Now this is obviously supposed to be on boost. We were just going to get it running NA, kind of save a little money on the project and to get it running and driving. And considering we're selling it, we're probably going to be selling it NA. But in case it doesn't sell, or in case something happens in the future, I would have absolutely no problem throwing this thing on boost and seeing how much power it'll actually make. But as you can tell, everything looks a little crusty, and there's a lot of things I want to go over. Like the RBC manifold looks super hazy, all this needs to be repolished back up, and just a lot of little loving will make it go a long way to actually make it look like a swap it's actually worth. So we're going to begin. We're just going to strip certain things off of it. We're not going to go super crazy. We're not going to completely tear this down to a bare long block. We're just going to tear down a few things. Anytime that you're gonna go be working on your car, just do yourself a favor and save yourself a headache now and remove your exhaust studs. Now, the first time I did it, I had bought these titanium hardware for my exhaust side. The reason being that the exhaust side just gets exposed to a lot of heat and just wear and tear, and over time they corrode and then they snap, they get brittle and they get stripped, and it's just really annoying. So do yourself a favor and pick up some new hardware at the very minimum. And if you can afford a little bit extra money, buy titanium stuff. It lasts a long time, and this is the reason why it's so expensive, and it's very good. Save yourself the headache in the future, especially if you ever plan on, like in this car, in this case that it's NA now, and in the future I plan on making it turbo. I would need to access these anyway, so make it easy. Now, when I had swapped over from the traditional OEM hardware to the titanium hardware, I did it when the motor was inside the car. And this one stud was giving me a really hard time no matter what I did. So now that it's outside the car, I took advantage and I got it extremely hot. I got it hot enough that even the paint up here discolored. But just get it really hot, get a nice good weld that nut on as good as you can. And then from there, you guys just saw, just put a wrench and whack it out. So 10 out of 10 recommend, always going to titanium hardware. But anyways, back to disassembling. And so that's going to be it for today, guys. You guys can tell, we took our K-Series apart. Now we're going to be polishing up some parts, putting everything back together, and hopefully dropping the swap back in to see this car running soon. So like always, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.